welcome to this FEM session. We're pre-recording with Samantha Secomb today. She's from Women's Wealth. I'm really so pleased you're here, Sam. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for asking.
And Sam's going to share with me through a session, which is a Q&A session, around her paper that she's written for the PFS, which is called Women's Career Progression in the UK Financial Planning Sector. And we're going to chat about various things that have come up in that, challenges that are ingrained in society for women, and a lot more and beyond. So I know it's going to be a really interesting conversation. So Sam, do you want to just give everyone a little bit of an introduction to yourself and, a bit about Women's Wealth and why you've set it up?
Yeah, sure. I'm a professional financial planner, chartered, fellow of the Personal Finance Society, all that good stuff. Won a couple of awards at the Women in Financial Advice Awards this year. So feeling really pleased with the progress that Women's Wealth has made. I launched Women's Wealth in 2019, having been working with my son in my traditional financial planning practice for 5 years, and he took it over, really. He's taken that over to release me for my passion project, which was to try and actually democratise independent financial advice for women, not only as investors, but as planners. I wanted to create a brand and a work environment that really made it attractive for women to come and be financial planners. So I wanted to do some research, which is where the paper came from. I did a very feminine thing, Gretchen. I did what lots of women do, and I learned this when I did the research. I thought, I know how to run a lifestyle financial planning business, but I don't really know how to scale up a business. I need a qualification. I'm going to go and get a qualification. So I went and did an MBA. Most men would have just got on with it.
Just done it, yeah.
Yeah, I had to go and get a qualification. So I went and got a qualification. And part of that was this dissertation. I thought, well, if I'm going to do primary research for the first time in my life, I need it to be about something I really want to know about. And I wanted to know why there were so many women in financial services that were qualified well enough to be advisors, but weren't doing it. Was it because they didn't want to? Or was it because they were experiencing barriers to progressing into the role? And I wanted to learn about those barriers, really. I was really keen to know, what are those barriers if they do exist? And how can you build a business that didn't include those barriers so as more women would want to become financial planners? And that's what the foundation of Women's Wealth. So I've built the business with the objective that it would be a great place to work if you're a woman.
Great. It sounds very exciting.
It is. And, I've had to learn some new skills along the way. So progress has been a bit bumpy. I've had to learn to recruit and train. Kathy Harrison at the Verve Group helped me build a training platform. But, I'd never done any of that before. So, I've had to learn some new skills. That's part of that. Like, how do you build a business that isn't a lifestyle IFA practice, but more of a kind of a network for women to come and collaborate together and learn how to build their businesses and work with a chosen audience that they can identify with, and how to do that, how to market to that audience and all of that stuff. So women like to collaborate, so it's very important that the environment is collaborative rather than competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, let's just start with a little bit about what that research has found then. I mean, the first thing that I want to talk about is that the research found that women don't need to act like men to be effective financial planners. And I guess I want you to tell us a little bit more about why this misconception persists and how women's strengths contribute uniquely to the field. Because I know that 20 years ago, and the advisors that are 20 years older than me, they did actually have to behave quite a lot like a man to get anywhere, and I'm very thankful that we don't need to do that anymore. But I'm interested to hear what the research showed, for definite.
Well, I'm definitely of that age group where I had to become very alpha to survive, in the financial services industry that I joined as a saleswoman.
Yeah.
That's a very different environment to the professional services financial planning profession that we now enjoy. So I think it's really important to recognise the amount of progress that has happened over the last 10 or 15 years and celebrate that, because it is the foundation for change, which is really positive for women. So that's a really important factor. But unfortunately, the people who are hiring are still the people who trained like I did. And they keep measuring an ideal financial planner on the template, which is actually an ideal financial salesman from history. So we've got this kind of loop that's happening, and we need really for some real kind of interruption to that behaviour. So it is that male pale stale thing going on still, and I think time will sort it out. But there are some things we can do to disrupt it now. So we can call out this behaviour. I think there's more and more of that happening in financial services. Unfortunately, at one time we had 23% female financial advisors. It's gone backwards.
Gone down.
There are many professions or industries that can boast that they're going backwards with the kind of gender diversity, but it happens. I think some of that was down to RDR.
Yeah.
And I think the creation of the power planner role. So you can be a professional woman in the financial planning sector without being client facing.
Yeah.
And I think that offered women a lot of opportunity. But what that also taught me through the research was what the work environment for a professional woman in financial planning sector looked like. These power planning platforms where women can work, then it doesn't matter. They don't have to be always available. If they're doing the school run and the client phones, nobody minds because there's a team to answer the phone to clients. They're researching, report writing. They can do it at 2:00 in the afternoon or 2:00 in the morning. It doesn't matter as long as they get the report delivered. So they're measured on their knowledge, their output. They don't have to be forever available. It's not about FaceTime in the office. So they can do that role and they can do it really well, and they can fit it in around everything else that they're doing. And they enjoy that. So that was a big clue as to how you might design a business so as it was more acceptable to a woman who's going to be running her home and her lifestyle. So if you can plant her in the middle of her home and she can still deliver all her expertise as a career person, then you've solved half the problems. She doesn't have to be available during school run. She can put the tea on and let it cook for half an hour and still be doing some report writing or taking a call or doing whatever it is that she needs to do without anybody even noticing, really. So it's just rethinking it. And I think one of the problems we've got is that the workplace as we know it pretends to be gender neutral, but actually in the industrial era, it was built by men for men, and the templates we're using date back to that era. If women had designed it, it wouldn't be done the way it's done.
And I think part of that maybe is to do with like business owners being braver around changing that mold and going, we can still run a relatively, let's just be gentle, like relatively traditional style of business, but the hours might need to be slightly different, expectations around that amount of time in the office or timings of the office. You might still be able to come to an office, but it might be at reduced amount of time, etc. Just need to be like, because a lot, I think you get into like, oh, how will my clients react to this? But actually, like the majority of changes that you make, I think as long as it's within reason, like clients can be really flexible and willing to work around that. They've also got experience of the same things.
Well, exactly. Half the clients are women. Half the clients are women. So they don't care if you're not available on the school run because they bloody well are too. Yeah. So I think we forget that as well. And we have got this, like, the data tells us, doesn't it, that the wealth is transitioning into women's hands. So I think the advisors of the future need to be speaking to the wealth controllers of the future, and they need to start soon. And that those wealth controllers, you know, they're going to be really happy to land on a Zoom call with you, because they can't, you know, they can't actually organise enough childcare to drive up to the city, find a parking space, be with you for an hour, you know, and then get home in time for whatever is needed or required of them that evening. They can, you know, if they can land on a Zoom call with you and fit in their financial planning without leaving the house, that's going to suit them. It's not going to be seen to them as a reduction in service. It's going to be seen as accessible and flexible. So
Yeah.
I think we make it up sometimes. We think that because the way we've served clients in the past has worked, that it is what they want. And we haven't really explored offering other options. COVID, I think, certainly taught us a lot in the traditional financial planning practice that I run with my son. You know, it taught us that half the clients that we thought would never give up their home visits and what have you were absolutely delighted with the idea that they'd never have to serve us tea and cake again, and they could just jump on a Zoom call and get it over within an hour. It's like, oh, right, okay.
Yeah, they don't have to tidy up the washing, so that everything's neat and tidy or anything like that. Yeah, I think so. I think COVID changed a load of things. And I think the important thing is that we try and harness some of that change that has been almost forced upon us, for the benefit of women, and making sure that organisations start to change. So you mentioned male, pale and stale earlier about, you know, decision makers. And, you know, I've certainly got experience of talking to someone, and they literally, I remember them telling me, oh, well, we have interviewed a woman, but she's not really very like me, and I don't think the clients would like it.
Do you know, I interviewed, well, I didn't interview, I was chatting to at a seminar, a financial services seminar, somebody I really, really respect. I'm not going to name him. I really respect him. He runs a B Corp IFA practice that, you know, I model myself on. I aspire to be like him. And I said to him, how do you handle recruitment? Because I'm still trying to get to my head. And he said, I'll tell you what I did. So I got a firm in, and we wrote an avatar. So we talked to all the kind of successful advisors in the practice, and we built an avatar of all the attributes and characteristics of this successful financial planner. And do you know what? It was quite amusing, Sam, because we already have 3 Robs in the business. So we called the avatar Rob. And it's like, can you not see the problem? You're designing your future based on your past. And actually, whilst that might be okay in some industries, in a profession where you've already been told that your future clients are nothing like your historic clients, do you not think you need to prepare for future clients? And I think this is the biggest thing I can try and get across to businesses, is that you are missing an opportunity. The talent pool of women is loyal, it's less expensive, it's less likely to beat you up for wage increases and threaten to leave, because women, once they choose their workplace, that workplace, they love the familiarity, they love the camaraderie of a team they know, it's workable with their family and their other interests, so they won't leave for a few quid more, because there's just too much at stake. So they're loyal, they're good, they're technically capable, they're better qualified normally than their male counterparts. You just need to be a bit open-minded and flexible about the number of hours you're going to expect them to commute and turn up in an office, because that's not how they run their life. Men love that. For some reason, guys love to get out of the house and, like, you know, spend time away, go somewhere on the way home. Like, well, you know, women aren't going to meet up in the pub and work that vertical network. They're going to be home. They've got responsibilities at home, way more important to them. And I don't mean more important to them like, do you want to kind of like go to a kid's show, or go to the pub. You know, there are plenty of women out there who would love a night in the pub. But the point is, a woman is never going to throw her family under the bus to advance her career. Her entire being, her femininity and her psyche will not permit that. So, like, you know, you can't compare. You've got to kind of look at the situation and go, what are the strengths of women in the workplace? Do we need those? Can we harness them because they're loyal, good value workers? You know, so like, how do we make this a nice place for them to work?
Yeah, and we know that the statistics and everything lean towards having a diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of gender, diversity of experience, of religion. You know, so many different things will lead to a better rounded business. But we see repeatedly that everyone's just hiring the same person.
Yeah, because we hire in the image of ourselves,
Yes.
don't we? There's that research which basically says, you know, you get two CVs and they say exactly the same thing, but one's got a male gendered persona and one's got a female, exactly the same experience.
Absolutely.
And, you know, depending on who's reading it, you know, you're very likely to get a bias. If it's a woman reading it, then she might be more attracted to the female candidate. A man might be more attracted to the male candidate. You know, it's kind of, we hire in the likeness of ourselves, and we have to be conscious of that. We have to examine that unconscious bias as human beings and challenge ourselves around it. And I don't think a lot of hirers do. I don't.
No. And I think it is, I think that some of your research, and I am going off piece of these questions, but I know that you know your research off by heart. But some of the research was like indicating that, yeah, that we almost, in bigger companies, there is that kind of support as well, that you'll have a HR team and they're ticking certain boxes. There might be blind CVs. You know, we know that wealth management, for example, the bigger part of financial services, has been working on diversity for a lot more years. They're getting better diversity stats, etc. But also those bigger practices do have a little bit more resource to kind of go, we're going to want a blind, we're going to remove some of these biases if we can. And then smaller companies, you know, and that's the field that you and I are more familiar with.
Yeah.
We're struggling on two parts. We've got this kind of like bias that we've somehow got to control in our hiring. And then we've got, you know, you're a small business, so every cog is really important. And if that cog wants to do something slightly different from someone else, then it can start to rock that a little bit. And how can we be flexible enough to make sure that we're okay with that and our business is resilient enough to be okay with that? So, like, that's quite a big player in this as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And I do think that we have to, all of us, especially the women who work in financial planning sector, cognizant of the commercial need. Your job is an exchange of your time for money. You have to produce something with the time and then you get the money. Like, it's doing, I think women can get a little bit, especially with so much kind of attention and discussion around women being better supported and companies being required to change, and so they should change. Yeah. They were built by men for men. They're out of date and they need to change, no doubt about that. But women need to stop going, you have to be diverse for me. Well, no, they don't. What they have to do is serve their clients and make money for their shareholders. So you have to go to them with a proposition that serves all the stakeholders, you, them, and the shareholders and the clients, you know. So you can't expect everything to roll over and go your way when you are asking a company, a business, a commercial enterprise to change in order to accommodate you. You have to go with a business proposition.
And it's like, how are you going to solve that problem for them in a mold that suits you?
Yeah. Go identify the problem. I know that probably go into an interview and say, I know that the other candidates are probably men, and that you might know exactly how they're going to fit into your business. But can I tell you how I think I could be really valuable to you? And it might look a bit different, but I'm sure I can deliver more than them. better work than them, and I'll be more loyal because, you know, once I get this this program running for me and my family, for you and your business, I am not going to want to change it. You know, that's a 10-year mission for me. So I'm here to stay. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how I can fit it in. You know, talk to them about their business and their business needs.
And I was going to say, because that's right. So that's what women are doing when they go self-employed, because they can't have that conversation in an employed environment, because we're not open to doing that generally, and because of all of this kind of underlying societal thing that there's just, we can't do it because of other assumptions that we can talk about in a moment. Actually, when you go self-employed, that's what you do. You say, this is the goal for me and my family. How can I deliver it within the restrictions I'm going to place on myself? So why can't we just be having that conversation more, but in that different environment?
Because if we don't have that conversation as business owners, we are going to lose that talent. They are going to go self-employed. So you're going to lose those loyal, good value resources from your business, and they're going to go off and do it. They're either going to become power planners, like, because they can become freelance power planners very easily, or they can be employed power planners, especially for agencies where they can flex in and out of the amount of work they want to do. You know, if they've got a newborn, they might drop off the calendar for 4 months, and then they'll come back doing 2 mornings a week, and then 4 mornings a week, and then 4 days a week, you know, so they can literally flex it around what they're doing. Why can't we talk to women about, you know, what is your family going to look like? How can we make it work?
So that was my next question, was like, there's this kind of HR-y thing that people are going to be worried about that should, you know, let's say that a business, and we'll say it's a male-led business, has done a great thing and hired a woman, and she doesn't have a family yet. You know, what kind of conversation can they even have about that from like
I think they can have any conversation they like, but they need to be having it with their male employees too. Because their 30-year-old male hire that hasn't got a family yet should be treated in the same way as their 30-year-old female hire who hasn't got a family yet. And I think that's the shame. That's the shame that exists in society. That's the shame that exists in commerce, is that women are assumed, because they've got a uterus, to be less valuable to the commercial environment than a man. Whereas if there were as many men taking the primary care role for children, then I think you would immediately end a lot of the gender bias. When an employer can't identify which one of their 30-year-old hires is most likely to take a year or 2 years out as a primary carer, then you've evened things up enormously, haven't you? But I'm not sure society is very welcoming to men who choose the primary carer role. I think society expects women to be carers. In fact, if a woman goes to work, then she's a bad mother. And if a man stays at home and looks after the children, he's a bad provider. So, you know, there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of stereotype, and I'm not sure society's ready for that equalisation yet. And maybe we have to accept that as a commercial reality. But until there are as many men welcome and enjoying being primary carers, and I've spoken to lots of men who have said to me, Sam, you know, I'm not one of these alpha men. I'd love more time with my kids. I feel desperately guilty most of the time because I don't get as much quality time with my family as I would like to. So I think employers are exploiting that competition in workplaces with men as well. So like, I think the whole thing needs to be a bit rebalanced, without losing sight of the fact that when you are an employee, or no matter how you're contributing to a commercial enterprise, it has to work for the commercial enterprise, its clients and its shareholders. So, you know, there's no reason why we have to become less commercially effective and optimal. In fact, I think you can be more commercially optimized if you're more aware of the needs of your workforce and you're agile enough to address them. People aren't asking for the same money for less work. People are asking to be able to do the work when it suits them to do it. And if they can't deliver it, then of course they'll get paid less. So they're not asking to do less. They're
Yeah, it's
asking.
really interesting. And I think it's so deep ingrained. Like I catch myself, and I'm 100% like want to support women and we need babies and we need future life, we need, as it is, less people are having babies. I haven't got babies, but I know that we need them and we need, I know that, for some people that is their absolute heart's desire. Um, and I just, there's this, we're societally not yet set up for it. And then, of course, there's this massive thing where we've progressed so far in women's empowerment, but at the same time, it's having a knock-on effect to like what the role men actually
Yeah.
have in society. So I think they're kind of clinging on a little bit to it as well, because we haven't redefined that. And it's almost like, actually, why can't we both be defined as the same thing? We can provide for our family, we can earn, we can be caregivers, we can both do those things. But yeah, it feels like we're like really far away from
Yeah, I think
it.
it's getting better. I mean, when I speak to the 20-something-year-olds in our office and in my family, I talk to them, my triplet nieces, bless them, they're in their early 20s. And when I said to them, no, it's the gender pay gap and all that, and they said, well, it's illegal. I said, what do you mean? I said, it's been illegal since the 70s. It hasn't gone anywhere. Do you know what I mean? So like, bless
Just
them.
because it's illegal doesn't mean it's not happening.
So do you know what I mean? It's kind of like but they in their heads, of course, men and women get paid the same. They've hit the workplace believing that. And when they're hiring and they're managers, it'll all be fine. But that's 30 years away. It's what can we do now to interrupt the current thinking of, the generalized statement, the male, pale and stale,
Yeah.
current middle management that are hiring and making decisions about what a good financial planner looks like. How can we interrupt their thinking, challenge their only human but nevertheless unconscious bias in their processes, and ask them to think about the advantages of hiring a woman over a man, not just the differences from their current familiar template, but the advantages, and teach women not to be more like men so as they can compete with the men for the roles, but to sell their commercial benefits to the organisation and go to the organisation with a problem-solving attitude which delivers productivity and loyalty, because those are things that women find it really easy to deliver.
And I think it's really interesting because I've always got like in the back of my head, and I think it's, one thing that's gotten me to where I am is that I was always just told, you never just bring the problem. Just
Yeah.
never just bring the problem. Come and talk to my door. I always remember my door is always open, but don't just bring the problem to me.
Yeah.
You've got to have thought, like, what's the next step? And it might not be perfect, but we can have a conversation about it. We can rework that and you can go away and think about it more. But you've got to bring something to me that we can work with.
Even if it's something that I shoot down and go, no, that won't work.
Yeah.
At least try and come up with something.
Yeah. And I've spoken to Jackie Lockie before a lot about like managing your manager, and that falls into
Managing
it as well.
upwards.
Managing upwards falls into this kind of space for women as well. Like think about those skill sets, and it's really interesting. Like it's always, as I say, I remember someone telling me it. But I know that people quite often they don't think about that being that next step. This woe is me. This is my problem, but not necessarily like moving forward with that. But
and when you're talking to a man who's been in the same role for a long time, he's hired many times before, and the system that he's used appears to be working, you're asking a lot for him to think differently and trust some other information. So like go with your resources, go with your data, go with your statistics, go with your ideas. Like, because you're trying to get him to think differently. And that's not easy, not for any of us to think differently. So.
No, I agree. And so we talked a little bit about workplaces needing to be a bit more flexible, to be collaborative environments, that you found that's what works well for women. Is there anything that you've learned that you can kind of share with us around how companies can change, like kind of policy, and things like that, so that they can be like that little bit more changing culture, I guess, to meet
Yeah.
those needs?
Yeah, I think it's very much a question of if a business really wants to affect its cultural middle, which is very hard to do, then it has to start by thinking about how it treats men. So, like, what's the paternity leave? What's, how are you treating men who might want to be primary carers? Are they scared to tell you because they feel they won't get promoted? Because if you can address that, then all we want is them treated the same. Like, treat men the same way you would treat women, assuming that they have just as much likelihood or desire to be a primary carer as the women. And I think if you can do that about face, then you know what it is you need to do for both. But most people don't. Most companies go, you know what, we've got a mostly male workforce, that's how we do it, because it suits the mostly male workforce. But have you ever asked them? Have you ever asked any of the men whether they would, if they weren't paid more than their wives? Because that's the other thing. When you're in a couple and you decide you're going to have a family and you can't both keep your careers on track, it's normally her career that goes under the bus because she's paid less. They probably do the same job, but she's still paid less. Do you see what I mean? So her career goes under the bus, which is really bloody unfair. But that's what happens a lot of the time. So the man is actually still turning up in your office, alpha male, because she got paid less, not because he didn't want to care for his kids. So,
It's
like,
really interesting because, I've got a friend who is in public sector, okay, and she didn't have children of her own. She adopted two children, but they were both very young. And at the time, both of them work in public sector, and both of them split the adoption leave. And both of them then now also, he does 4 days, she does 4 days. So they've got 2 days, they're sharing that. And like in that public sector kind of space, negotiating that was no real issue. And I don't know whether that's something that's just more, it's a bit more open, their policies are a little bit more clear. And then in smaller businesses, or in our private sector of space, it's just, not maybe filtered down yet. There's that. And then I mentioned that to you earlier, that I was speaking to Sasha Wakefield, and she's on my podcast, and it probably will have been come out by the time this is published. And she's talking about her maternity leave now being shared with her partner, and him being off for taking the majority of the time off, actually, so she can keep her self-employed paraplanning business kind of going, and his employer being flexible enough to do that. So there are situations that I know of, and I mean that's just in the group of people that I know. So things are definitely happening, but you say it's not natural that
no.
would be the default that people would think of.
But there are examples there. There's experience that you could go and share with an employer that you want to work for, where you're going to be in competition with men for the role, and you can explain the different circumstances that you see going on and how that would help you navigate any changes in your circumstances.
I think there's a lot of like stigma to discussing things like that in an interview, but the reality is, if you're being interviewed and you are anything of child rearing, bearing age, in the back of anyone's mind is that at some point this woman may well want a family. And how's that going to affect her career, or not even her career, because her career, in my view, should still be completely on the table and available to her. But what's her commitment and to my business going to be? And that comes back to the conversation we had earlier around, kind of draw it out as you imagine it. But I think there's quite a lot of stigma, and as I say, the HR thing, people get a bit like, we shouldn't talk about that in an interview, And
I think there is that, and this is where like I get an opportunity maybe to explain my analogy that I enjoy so much. It came out of Laurie Meakin's book. Laurie Meakin's a client of mine, and she wrote a book called No More Menemies. And her business is all about, this kind of equaling up and he for she movement, because we need men to be on board with this. So, but she says if you've got red paint and you're aiming for orange, it's no good adding orange. You need to add yellow, because the only way to orange is yellow. So it's this positive discrimination to get to the equality. The thing is, like we've said it once, I'll say it again, the workplaces were built by men for men. They're run by men. So there has to be disruption, and that leads to this uncomfortable feeling. If I was male, pale, 50, white, I would be thinking, oh my God, they don't get what they want unless I lose something I've got. So that's an uncomfortable place to be, isn't it? Arguably, should never have been there, but they are. So it is a question of this needs levelling out now. But it makes people feel uncomfortable. But that's what we've got to do. That's the journey that we're on. And you do have to, no matter who you are or where you are, recognise that that's the direction of travel, and think about how you're going to capitalise on that. So if you run a business and you realise that you are going to have to stop favouring male hires because they're less likely to go off on maternity leave, you're not allowed to do that anymore. And your future clients may not want to speak to a male advisor. So you've got to work out how to be more attractive to female advisors. Otherwise, you're going to lose your clients, because those female advisors are going to go self-employed, set up in competition to you, and the clients are going to find them very attractive to go and talk to. So they could teach you how to be more present for people like them. Because if you just keep hiring, your Rob, from your, do you know what I mean? You're just going to appeal to the clients you used to serve, not the ones you're going to need to serve in the future. So I really do think that everybody has got something to gain from being more open-minded and having the discussions, having the talks. And if women have to open up the discussion and go with the solution, then sell the diversity of thinking, the diversity of what you could add to a marketing discussion, what you could bring in terms of loyalty.
And also maybe just get to the nub of it and say, I know you're going to be really worried that I'm going to have a baby, but even if I do, I'm going to be, like you said, 100% committed. If it's going to aid me and my family, you can guarantee that I'm going to be here for the longevity. And so why would you not do this? Let's think about how we can collaborate to make it good for business, good for me, good for my family.
Women, I know this from the marketing research we've done for our clients, but it's also very evident from the research I did. Women, and I use the word crave deliberately, women crave security. We absolutely crave it. So if you talk to a man about what's successful, or it looks like it's got wheels and sails and it's very aspirational, and you talk to a woman, all the kids are educated, the mortgage is paid off, and we'll never be worse off than we are today.
Yeah.
Once you've got that nailed, then you can get aspirational, but security first. And it's the same with their careers. Yeah. They will stay with an employer who's underpaying them because they know the role, because they know they can manage it relationally to everything else, because the commute's not too long and they can get back for pickup from school. They will stay with that employer forever. Who wants to train people and then have them use the skills you gave them to negotiate a better salary with a competitor? I know which one I want in my business.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm positively discriminating in favour of the people who are more loyal, more collaborative, less kind of sensitive to salary, and just more committed to long-term relationships with me and my clients. So I don't see what the problem is. I don't see why we're not all hiring women over.
And I think, there are, especially in the SME, the field, cohorts that I would say are, in a similar peer group to me. I think people are trying. I do think they're trying. I can think of 5 firms that I know that have made that female hire, and that's their first female hire at that financial planning level. And I think it's really, they are deliberately positively discriminating to make that decision, and they have clocked it, but it's small gains, but still going there. So we've talked a lot about that. What about the side, bearing in mind that a lot of people who are going to be watching this are going to be working in financial planning. Now, they might see their role as being like you and I, a role model. Hopefully, I like to think we're role models anyway, to be
We're
more
making ourselves
visible,
very deliberately visible, aren't we?
very deliberately
This and
visible,
other
so that
things.
people can see it is achievable. How important do you think that is? And there might be other people watching it who don't tend to get as involved with other projects like you and I do. Why is it so important, do you think?
I don't, and people, there are extroverts and there are introverts. You and I are extroverts. You put a camera on us and it energizes us and we love it. I've got people in my team who really don't enjoy that, and every minute on screen in front of a big audience drains the life out of them. They can do it, but they need to go and lie down in a room for 3 hours afterwards. You and I will be like off to the gym and energized by it. So it's horses for courses. But the woman who's an introvert will still be a role model for everybody she's meeting in her business, clients and potential planners. Even the men are going to be looking to see, how does she pull this off?
Yeah.
Like, she's got 2 kids and a husband. Like, how is she managing all of it? So she's a role model to them as well. So I think we just need to be aware that we don't have to be like them to be impressive.
Yeah. And also there might be other ways we can contribute. Like there's just a few things, obviously you've done the research for the PFS. They're always after people writing content. You don't have to do video content, blog writing, any kind of, anything you feel you want to write about that's on this cause of developing women in financial planning. I think there is going to be someone who's going to be very, very welcoming to anything that you want to, show, and mentoring as well.
Yeah.
That could be more one-on-one rather than bigger picture. And I think it's all
The
really,
PFS
really
are
important.
asking for mentors, aren't they? I think Next Gen have a mentorship program.
And the Verve do as well.
And Verve do. So like you can join any of those and make yourself available to help other planners who are thinking, what's my next move? How could I improve myself? How am I going to have that negotiation? Talk to people in the organisation and make yourself available to talk to people who might not have had the conversation before. Because if you've had those conversations, if you've had some success in your career, if you've worked out how to study, raise children and meet your commercial targets, then you have got something to say, you've got something to teach. And there are lots of women out there sitting there thinking, I don't quite know how to make all this work. Have a chat with them. Show them how you did it. They might not be able to pull that off, but at least they'll have more information and some ideas. So I don't think you have to be you just have to be generous with your time.
Paying it forward a little bit, paying it forward. And those multiplied by lots and lots of people makes a massive difference, I think.
Yeah. And women are generous with their time. They are collaborative. I'm literally banking on that in Women's Wealth, because I train, I'm training what I call my dynamic dozen. I want 12 women who are trained using the platform that we've got, using the supervisory role that I've developed, and I'm hoping that once they've got 4 or 5 years experience, they'll be training their 12.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we'll increase the numbers of women working in financial planning. That's the mission. And I do think that women generally do want to pay it forward. They do want to collaborate. I do want to help others.
I'm quite intrigued. Like I think we've talked about most of the questions, even though I had set questions, but there is just, going a little bit back, we talked about positive discrimination, talk a little bit about allyship. And I'm also really intrigued because at one point, I don't know whether he's still with you, but you did have a guy working with you at Women's Wealth, right? So talk to me, just let's close off on allyship and maybe some of the experiences of that I know he's, probably only by joining Women's Wealth that he'd realised actually how different giving advice to women is. And I'm quite intrigued by that.
Yeah. Well, Simon's a very what is he? He is an interesting guy. He's like accountancy trained, but he made a living gambling. So to raise his kids, so it's fascinating to talk to. It wasn't like casino gambling. It was more like arbitrage price gambling,
Okay.
as a mathematician and an accountant, he did that, pulled it off, made a living out of it for years. So all of those skills, like, and but he was primary carer for his children. So like that was important to him. That was why. And when he's come to do financial planning, he's kind of like, it's not only that he recognises how disadvantaged women are, he also recognised the fixed fee model and subscription makes it accessible, takes away a lot of the sales levers. And that creates an environment of collaborative relationship building rather than, doing a fact find and some cash flow modelling so as you can get to the transaction which earns you the money. So the thing is that financial services needs taking to bits, really, so that we stop this idea that it is really actually about it is about the sale and the commission, which we now call fees, facilitated in the investment. Do you mean, like, we need to kind of divorce all of that and get on with the proper job of professional financial planning. So Simon saw that was actually what I had created in Women's Wealth, and he wanted to be part of that. He wanted to be part of being able to do real good with none of those sales levers in play, in an accessible way. So our clients don't already need to be wealthy, they pay a subscription. They don't have to have any capital at all to access independent financial advice. So that was important to him as well. But he has landed in an all-female environment, and we have to ally him. We have to make sure we don't leave him out. And I often say girls, and it's like, yeah. I mean, so he gets us to think. But imagine that. So we have to think about Simon, and Simon brings diversity of thought to our team meetings. And one of the reasons I was so impressed that he wanted to join us and so pleased that he's part of the team is that if I build an all-female team, I build in the same weaknesses as companies that have all-male teams.
Yeah.
We haven't got that diversity of thought.
And you can like be in a bit of a bubble, Sam, because that's the bubble that I lived in, that bubble for like 5 years until we hired a male in our business.
Yeah. So we can weaken our businesses by being too female focused. I'm lucky in that I've got Ollie on the management team, and Ollie and I run the other business together. And I remember Ollie's my son, and I remember his teachers saying to me, if we ever want Jeremy Clarkson's view of the world, we ask Ollie. So like you can imagine how that goes down with some of the Women's Wealth stuff. But it is that diversity of thought. It is like that pushback on ideas and language and opinion. And every now and again he'll say, do you know how insulting that sounds? Like, to the male listener. And it's, sometimes I go, I don't really mind, to be honest.
Yeah. That's okay. That's what I'm doing. I'm being a disruptor.
Absolutely. I think it's time that somebody said this isn't on, guys. So I don't mind sometimes, but on other times I really didn't mean it to. And it's good to have somebody say, that's unnecessarily unkind. Not even real, and put me back in my box a bit. And I think it's important for women to understand that same dynamic, that when you're asking a man to think outside of the box, don't expect it to be easy. But find the men who are willing to talk to the woman who says, that isn't right. There will be some men who go, oh, move aside, love. But there will be some men who are willing to hear you, willing to listen to you. And if you can then persuade them that's a benefit to their business to include you, you've got a friend for life. So I really think there are lots of positives. And those allies, those male allies, if you find one of those, then, you can be beneficial to them, but they can teach you a lot as well. So it really is about that. And
it does absolutely go both ways. 100%.
And it won't be everybody, So don't ask someone and get pushed back and then not ask someone else. Like, find your ally.
Just move on. I just now move on from them. Move on. Okay, don't want to be involved.
With Towery Law back in the day, and my God, that was a male-dominated organisation. And I remember thinking, right, some of these people I can't go through, I can't get round, so I'm just going to have to pretend they don't exist. And carry on anyway. Do you know what I mean? So it was, you can't get hung up on changing the world. but find a few friends, find a few people who are willing to listen to your ideas, even if they don't understand them, and be willing to listen to theirs.
And celebrate what you're doing, even if that, we can't get everyone to do the same thing. And if they're not going to do positive discrimination in their own business, at least celebrate what you're doing, at least support what you're doing, and see that there's value in that. I think that's allyship. It doesn't mean we all have to be doing the same thing. It doesn't mean that we all have to be can't always be 100%, but we can be supportive and not dismissive. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. So we're grateful to have Simon on the team.
Yeah.
He keeps us focused. And I think, the same can be said in any all-male team. They need you as a woman on their team.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful to have Aled, because his brain and my brain work completely differently. Crazily differently. So,
if he wasn't there, you'd never know that. You wouldn't realise.
No. And sometimes we have to go, oh, hang on a second. We have to work out what that means, but that's okay. Those conversations are okay. And I think it's important that we have them,
That's what makes the business stronger, your proposition stronger.
Yeah.
So,
well, Sam, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and I know we could just keep talking about it.
But,
but I have really enjoyed it. And what I'll do is, when we upload this, we'll make sure that the link to the PFS and the link to your data, so that everyone can take a read of that, is attached to it as well, so that we are sharing that and able to. And I'm sure, if there are any questions, people can put them to us, and we're both, I know you're on LinkedIn. We're both on LinkedIn, so people can just message if they need.
Yeah, feel free to put my LinkedIn address in the show notes.
Yeah. Fab. Well, thank you so much for today. It was really good.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.